I was reminiscing the other day with John Calhoun about those years in which we had a healthy, multi-faith staff to share in the responsibilities of preaching here at mbcc. John and Rabbi Kahane, associate ministers, and myself would share our faith and individual approaches to the faith from the pulpit. John felt this variety was healthy and provided more food for thought than a single voice might bring week after week. I heard of a conversation where someone was trying to identify our church to another person, and after giving the location and all, the person caught on and said, "Oh, you mean that church with the rotating ministers?" So the Dodgers may have their bobbleheads, but we have our rotating ministers. Well, it was fun while it lasted, but those days are probably gone forever. The part of the amusement I derived from the whole arrangement was to see how John would deliberately pick out non-Christian hymns so that when the rabbi preached, he would be more comfortable. And then the rabbi would get up to preach, and 9 times out of 10, he would preach from the New Testament, the words of Jesus. John and I used to speculate that Rabbi Kahane probably knows the New Testament better than either one of us put together. It seems only fair, then, that we Christian preachers should include in our approaches to spirituality the timeless truths we find in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures. As I wrote that down, I remembered the words of my Old Testament seminary professor, Dr. Stewart, who would tell us, I don't know how many times, you can't understand the New Testament without the Old. And there's a good deal of truth in that. Perhaps no more evident than when we look at what we call the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. Now, let's face it. The first problem we encounter here, which is not unique to our time, but is emphasized by our desire for freedom and individuality and self-actualization. The first problem is we don't like to be told what to do or what not to do. Nothing new. You go back to the story of creation, where we have Adam and Eve, representatives of all humanity, living in an idyllic setting that we call Eden. And they are given only one negative commandment. Do not eat of this particular tree. And we hear echoes of ourselves as they say, oh yeah, just watch. And the rest, as they say, is history. It would indeed be a much more wonderful world if we would only do that which is good and loving and merciful. So prohibitions would not be necessary. But that's not the world we live in. It'd make our job as parents so much easier, so much more delightful, if our children would voluntarily do their homework. They'd keep their rooms clean and orderly. They'd put everything back where it belongs. They would ask permission before using someone else's things. If they would come in at a decent hour. They'd help out with cooking and cleaning. If they'd never whine or complain and say, but everybody else is doing it. Maybe that's the way it is or was at your house, but I doubt it. So in every generation, parents are obliged to lay down the law. And then to cajole and plead and threaten, bargain, discipline, and explain to their children in a losing effort to make them comply what we feel is best for them. And then, if as parents we have enough patience and wisdom and understanding, we watch them grow up and voluntarily start doing those things in their own homes. But we can't blame it on the kids. We don't like to be told what to do either. You know, in the marriage ceremony, we no longer use the word obey. It just doesn't work that way. At least not in most of the families that I know of. If I tried to tell my wife what to do, let's not go there. We don't like commandments, but some are necessary. Traffic signals. We all know red light means stop. Green light means go. Yellow light means step on it. Here in LA, we're getting more like Miami, Florida, big retirement community. I was telling somebody one time, man, it's awful driving down there. The light turns green, you've got to wait for 3 cars to go by before you can make your move. This man said, that's good. I used to live there, and it was 5 cars then. We do need stop signs. They do need to be obeyed. So in our personal living, as children of God, we are given some commandments which we need to obey. And God gives us these not to exercise His authority over us or to make our lives miserable, but because He wants us to live in harmony and in peace with each other, with God, and with ourselves. It's for our own good, for our own benefit, that the commandments are given. I discovered through Google 200 Anglican priests were surveyed. Only 68 of them could name all 10 commandments. But 100 of them believed in aliens. Now, incidentally, the only two commandments that all of them could remember were the ones about adultery and coveting your neighbor's wife. Definite no-nos. But I can't criticize these Anglicans because I would be hard put to list all 10 commandments myself. But I know where to find them. And in a great act of generosity, I'm going to share that knowledge now with you. Here's the way it goes. You know there are 10 commandments, and they're listed twice. Now, for you engineer types who insist upon accuracy, I have to say they're actually listed 3 times. But the third one is much later and has to do with feasts and festivals that are unique to Judaism, so I say forget that. Go back to 10, besides that messes up the formula. You got 10 commandments, they're listed twice. So you go to the second book in the Bible. Don't even need to know the name, just the second book. As I say, they're listed twice, so 2 times 10 is 20. So you turn to chapter 20, and there you are. Exodus 2:20 is where you find the 10 commandments. But that's only once. You know there are 2 listings, so you're only halfway there. Well, half of 10, as you know, is 5. So you go to the 5th book of the Bible, and chapter 5. Voila, there you are, the second listing of the 10 commandments. Now you share this with your co-workers and your friends, and they'll think you're a biblical genius. But more important than knowing where to find them, of course, is to know them and to obey them, because they're basic laws upon which we can depend if we ever intend to live in a world of peace and justice and harmony. Some of us have stood in awe at the great cathedral in Amiens, France. Claude Monet, the artist, was fascinated by this structure. The great rose window over the entrance. And I don't know how many paintings that he did of this same scene in different light. The German poet Heinrich Heine was standing there one time with a friend of his before this cathedral, and he said, "Tell me, Heinrich, why can't people build piles like these anymore?" And Heine replied, "In those days, people had convictions. We moderns have opinions, and it takes more than opinions to build cathedrals." Well, for centuries, people have felt that God's 10 Commandments are a firm foundation upon which we can build the temple of life. Ted Turner doesn't agree with that. Ted Turner, the billionaire founder of CNN and other cable networks, received the Humanitarian of the Year award one time for suggesting that the 10 Commandments were not an expression of God's law, but we should replace them rather with what he calls 10 voluntary initiatives. I don't think that's going to cut it. But then I think we need more than humanism anyway. I need a belief system that is rooted and grounded in a caring creator God and the revelation given to us in his son Jesus. And that system is built upon the foundation of the 10 Commandments. In those brief statements, you find reverence for God, for his name, for the Sabbath day. You find respect for parents, for marriage, for life and property and human rights and truth. And while at first glance they may appear to be negative, they're actually positive, affirming life itself, and point to a basic code of conduct that has the best chance of enhancing and upholding the sanctity of life. And these commandments are not just for ancient Israel, but are offered to all the nations and peoples of the world. Rabbi William Silverman quotes from the Midrash, which is the commentary on the Jewish Torah. He said, "When God revealed himself on Sinai, there was not a nation at whose door he did not knock, but they would not undertake to keep it. As soon as he came to Israel, they exclaimed, 'All that the Lord hath spoken, we do and obey.'" Remember then, it was out of Israel that God sent his son, Jesus, to invite all people to become participants in the covenant, to take these commandments to a higher level, lived out in acts of love and kindness and mercy. I read of a notorious businessman who announced to Mark Twain, "Before I die, I'm going to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. I'm going to climb up Mount Sinai and read the 10 Commandments." Mark Twain says, "I have a better idea. Why don't you just stay home in Boston and keep them?" Well, Boston or Beirut, London, Los Angeles, Mumbai, or Manhattan Beach,